Happy Wednesday, beautiful reefers. Today we have Paul on today because we are going to dig into ORP, which is very, I feel like it's neglected. It needs more love and attention. It's very understood. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Devin. How are you? Happy Wednesday.
Thank you. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, how's your summer going?
I'm very busy, lack of time. In
Yeah, yeah.
not semi-reefing news, I splurged and bought a macro lens the other day, so I'm kind of excited to play with that for some future videos.
Mm,
Better eye candy for the videos. So that's my new toy that I've been playing with. But
get get close up of the polyps and things of that nature,
yeah, love it.
um, or aquabus connectors, whatever you feels appropriate.
I will take you a very nice photo of an Aquabus connector later.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yep. So
anyhow, yeah, it's going well. Thank you.
excellent. Good. Makes me happy. Good to hear. So ORP, the oxidation reduction potential of your water, kind of the high level overview, from my understanding at least. It's kind of, I know some people say it's kind of the clarity of your water, the cleanliness, which is like partially true but not fully. You have things in your tanks called reducers that are trying to like basically drive down your ORP and eat up the oxygen in your tank, and then you have the oxidizers which are trying to build it back up, and it's like this ongoing kind of battle between the two. So there's no like perfect ORP. It's just this constant ebb and flow in your tank based on what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, ORP is one of like the most, I think, misunderstood sort of variables that we monitor. But and the thing that drives me crazy is when I hear people say, "Oh, it's got ORP, but it has absolutely no value whatsoever," right? And I mean, I read this with relative regularity,
Mhm.
that the ORP doesn't have value, and it absolutely does have value, right? When I think of ORP, I think of it as kind of the barometer for your
Mhm.
tank, right? It is the thing that can tell you how your tank is sort of doing without actually even looking at your tank,
Yeah.
right? And so and why is that, right? I think that's a big thing. I think your high level overview is really good. I kind of even go higher than that sometimes, and I think I put this in the perspective of it's more or less the balance of good and evil in your tank, right? And you can't have too much good, you
Yeah.
can't have too much evil. They need to be in balance.
Mhm.
Okay. And when they're out of balance, you have your yin and yang is all messed up, and
Yeah.
you can have all sorts of things. So what does it mean when the evil is
Wait,
in strength?
which one's the evil? Is it the reducer?
Yes, the evil is the reducer, right? So
Okay.
it is the things. So it's one really great way to think about it is your kind of nitrification cycle, right?
Hmm.
The evils are nitrites, nitrates, these things that sort of accumulate in your tank more or less, right? And they need to be oxidized. They need to be broken down. Okay. And the good things in your tank, right, are your salts, are your oxygen, the things that essentially can reduce the
Hmm.
evil, right? And so what happens when there's too much pollutants or contaminants in your tank? You typically are going to have a lot of algae issues,
Yeah.
right? And you might have sick fish, right, because they're living in water that is polluted, right?
Hmm.
And so this gets into the clarity aspect that you spoke of a second ago. So this is water that might be yellow. This is water that looks just dirty, when you see it. It's a tank that typically needs to be cleaned quite often on the glass, right? Because it grows thing. It has more nutrient to be able to grow all of these sorts of things.
Hmm.
So then the good is oxygen. It is the bacteria in your tank that is going to be consuming these things, right? It's not so much the bacteria itself, but it's kind of the chemical process that bacteria goes to essentially reduce,
Yeah.
right? To
I
kind of oxidize.
Yep. I
Um,
mean, it to an extent, just
Mm-hmm.
thinking out loud here, a bacteria bloom could potentially reduce ORP because if they're sucking up the oxygen, there's going to be less oxidation potential, and then it very wood could drive it down, right? So if you,
It's the balance. It's too much
yep,
of one thing is no good.
yep,
Okay. Um, and I think that that's the best way to sort of think about this, right?
mm,
And you brought up a good point of the bacterial bloom, right? That's a water that's also not clean, but that's water that there is not a lot of oxygen in either, right? So
yep,
ORP ultimately falls as well.
mm,
So that's kind of like the under the hood part out about it. And I mean, we can go on and on. We could go on more about the chemistry of it, but I think we would all start to glaze over. And it's been a long time since my biochem days
mm.
and everything else. So I would be rusty speaking of free radicals and things of that
We'll
nature.
stick to the armchair science.
Yes, yes. So, but it can be incredibly helpful. Do you use ORP at all? And if you
I,
do, tell me about it.
I absolutely do in both my tanks. Now, the original reason I started paying more attention to ORP was because I use ozone. And that's basically a way to make sure I'm not doing too much ORP in the tank. So generally, with me, I like to keep my ORP less than 420. Some people say less, but to me, 380 to 400 is fine. One of the Randy Holmes articles I was reading, I think he said 650 is like the death zone, like it will nuke and sterilize everything. So again, you don't want to go too high, and again, too low is trouble.
Let's pause talking about numbers.
All
Okay.
right.
The reason being is ORP probes are notoriously difficult to calibrate. Like they're notoriously difficult to calibrate. You can calibrate them. You need essentially 4 and 7 solution to be able to do it, and then you need a powder called quinhydrone. Okay, and quinhydrone is toxic. So it's not something that you're going to find at your your local pet store typically or online. You would have to go to a chemical supply company to get it.
That's why it's hard to find.
Yes, and then
Yeah.
so essentially then you pour the so the way you calibrate it then is much like you would calibrate a pH probe. You essentially pour the quinhydrone into your 4 and 7 solution until it no longer dissolves. So right once you start seeing the particulate in the powder itself, in the solution itself, that's when you've added enough quinhydrone. You see to saturation is what we would say. And then you would then be able to calibrate it, knowing 4 and 7, because now we have standards that we calibrate. But if this number is very important to you, you would probably need to calibrate every couple weeks, if that. Because what happens on an ORP probe too, it also gets a biofilm on it and all these things. It's how it works appropriately. So when you first put an ORP probe into a system, they're going to read very low. Right. So ORP in the first 2 weeks of monitoring on a new probe has no value whatsoever. Right. It's zero. Yep. And the reason being is essentially it is, I don't know the technical reasons why, but the way that I kind of explain it is it's building up a biofilm on the outside of it. Okay. And essentially that biofilm is sort of how it will monitor your relative ORP in your tank. And I want to focus on the word relative there. Right.
Now, quick question. Doesn't the oxidizers more or less kind of like attack the probe or what's on the probe, and that's what attracts it to it, and kind of how you can gauge the value of them? Okay.
More or less, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you put the probe in the system, it sort of builds up its biofilm, and then that's how it can start to monitor. And then finally, after about 2 weeks or so, you should start seeing a behavior. And you dived into the number. Right. And I want to say the number matters to a certain degree, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's really what I always do is you want to make sure 2 things are happening. You're having a high and a low, high and a low. And if you were to graph that against your pH, it would be inverse. Right. So when pH is low at night, ORP is going to be high, and they're going to kind of crisscross every day. Okay. And then you have to do the relative look and see your aquarium, and you go, what? My tank's doing really well right now, and then you kind of start to understand that's my target ORP.
I have a question. Why would you say that it isn't inverse? Because like you are correct, like that's 24 hours, right? It is more or less an inverse. But
Mhm.
what is the main reason that they're opposite? I mean, it's probably complicated, but just if you have like a
It, it,
rough.
it would probably be chemistry that I wouldn't be able to explain appropriately. The way that I think about it, though, again, this deals very much with the oxygen, right, and the CO2 and everything that's kind of going on in the aquarium. The same way,
Mm,
same reason why your pH shifts
yep.
from morning to night,
Hmm.
right? So as that pH is falling at night, right, that ORP has a higher potential to be able to break down those contaminants,
Yep.
right? There is more free oxygen available in the system to be able to essentially do what it needs to do,
Mm.
right? Or it could have something to do with the CO2 too.
Yep.
I'm not entirely certain.
Okay. So, like in general, if you're not doing something to intentionally raise ORP, then the number itself doesn't really matter. You more care about what's your normal and what's your trends, and when
Hmm.
does it fall outside of those trends. I think that's the biggest value for a lot of people. Like Red Devil, one of the comments in the chat, says low RP indicates a problem in my reef tank. I was wondering why my corals were dying. Turns out I was overdosing trace amounts. The whole time ORP was very, very, very low. So,
Hmm.
I mean, again, when it tanks, that's an indication. Like, usually it's maybe a fish died or a bunch of snails bit the dust, and those organics are breaking down, and that's going to drive down the URP. Like, that's one of the, I'd say, the most common thing if you're not doing stuff like ozone or dosing hydrogen peroxide and other things to elevate your ORP.
And what you'll see, essentially is, if you're a water changer, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you'll see essentially with your ORP and water changes, right, is that immediately after the water change, ORP will fall
Mm-hmm.
considerably, right? It's because at that point, essentially, you've removed a bunch of the food from the aquarium, more or less, right? And so there's not much to reduce. So then therefore, it kind of falls, right?
Ah, that's why.
Yeah, more or less, right?
Yeah.
That's how I make sense of it.
Yeah.
But then you see it quickly. It should be back up to its normal level in about a day or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you're going to see between let's say you do a water change every 2 or 3 weeks, and at the 3 week point you say, it's been too long. I should
Mm-hmm.
do that water change in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You're going to see basically a slow fall of your ORP over time, right? And like a clockwork, you should basically always be like, my ORP gets below 275. That's always when my tank starts looking crummy. So I should start doing water changes when my ORP starts to get to a low point during the day of 300 or something like that, you know? Um, and so that's that tank barometer aspect for me, right? The other thing to consider too is just as you mentioned, it can tell you about system-wide events. So what are some of those events? You mentioned a couple of them. What were they?
Yeah, so usually when you see a big tank in ORP, usually it's because something died. Like there's some form of die-off in your tank. It could be, a big coral, it could be, a big turbo snail, it could be a fish. Usually it's something bit the dust and it's, decaying or is breaking down.
Your
And
3-year-old
those,
nephew came by and dumped a bunch of food into the aquarium.
yep, that
You
could
know?
very well do the same thing.
Yes. Your snails decided to spawn.
Hmm.
Your corals decided to spawn. Right. All of
Yep.
these things will basically lots of excess comes into the aquarium suddenly, right?
Hmm.
And will tank ORP, right?
Yep.
Um, there can be events though that spontaneously raise ORP too, right? So typically, have you ever seen any of those, Devin?
So again, UV can have a bit of an effect on it. It's not
Mhm.
as massive as ozone, but UV can definitely raise it up.
Mhm.
Dosing hydrogen peroxide will most certainly raise up your ORP. And ozone, of course, is the other one that will definitely raise it up.
Mhm.
So
Um,
those are the ones I've personally tried and saw the effect on.
it can also be something shorting in your aquarium.
Hmm,
Um,
interesting.
so if you start to get something that's essentially adding a charge into the water, you can start to see ORP become a little bit erratic as a result of that charge,
Yep.
and it typically starts to gain. Also, like the cleaning lady who went around and
Mm,
sprayed some weird chemical,
yep.
right? I've seen tanks just crash, in hours with that kind of thing. And what happened to ORP is ORP just started skyrocketing up.
Oh,
You
really?
know,
Not tanked?
yeah,
Huh. I
Yeah,
thought it
yeah,
was the
yeah.
opposite.
So whatever the cleaning agent was, right? It just started to really make a bunch of reduce basically making a lot of potential to break those things down.
Yep.
And typically, what you'll see too, like when you overdose ozone, what happens?
What happens? Well, your ORP shoots up, but
Right. You'll see weird things happen, like your fish will start to color out. They can even start to essentially kind of get marks on them and things like that.
mhm.
As a result of essentially their the gel, the biofilm on their body starts to get broken down
I've
and things
never
like.
ran that much, but good to know.
Yes,
Um,
yes. So you'll see burning on your fish and things like that.
one thing that I actually did see one time was on a yellow tang, had a bit of like a little bit of an orange blotchiness when dosing vinegar or vodka, one of the two, doing carbon dosing. So I quit doing it after that. But that's something I noticed. And just that side note, like again, carbon dosing likely would, promote bacteria bloom and drive down ORP. Just another random thought. Thanks for the super chat, dedicated reefer.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay, question Phil Reefkeeper in the chat. How long do ORP probes last? He said this is going on 7 years. Is it still good? Should it be replaced?
Again, it's such a relative number. Honestly, dude, it doesn't matter.
They're good for life.
Right. You're pretty, I mean, like, as long as, so it works just like a pH probe, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that the electronics of it, right, were very similar to a pH probe. The reference electrolyte is obviously different. Okay. And so what happens over time with any of these electrolytes is as they age, a higher concentration of salt water will continue to enter into that probe, right? So the way that the balance is made is between the reference electrode and the reference electrolyte. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On an old probe, what happens is essentially uh, you kind of start seeing exactly what you want to see, more or less,
Yeah.
right? Because basically the relationship between the electrolyte and the probe. Now, if you are dosing ORP, I would say that you should replace that probe with the same frequency as that you would a pH probe, right?
For your
Or
dosing ORP?
ozone.
Okay. I was like, how do I dose this directly?
If you're administering ozone.
Yeah.
If you're just using it as a reference, it doesn't matter. It's one thing. A good test though is take that probe out of the water itself and just put it in standalone water, some tank water, and just put some food and things like that in there, right? And just let it sit in there. That ORP should start to tank quickly, right? If for some reason you don't see that tanking quickly, I would probably replace the probe.
That's a nice easy test. Put it in your frozen food cup before you feed the tank and
Yeah, so something,
watch it
and it's
dive.
going to take a little bit of time because of that
Yeah.
biofilm, right?
Mhm.
So it's a longer test, right? It just kind of sits in there, but you should start to see ORP fall. Because the oxygen in that water column is going to get evaporated very quickly. It's going to be consumed by the bacteria and the organics that are in there, and then number two, you are adding additional nutrient there. Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't see that, then likely it means that your ORP is giving you a false sense of hope.
Good to know. That's a good test, actually. Random question in the chat. Clyde, I bought a used Apex. How long can an ORP probe be out of water? Will it dry up? Like, does it have to be hydrated all the time like a pH probe does? Similar thing?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can. It really doesn't matter if a probe becomes dry per se. Okay. The electrolyte should still be within it. Okay. It just basically becomes more of a gel in that situation. So the probe will work for a period of time after being taken out of the water and drying. You do have to rehydrate it, right? So how do you rehydrate it is you typically want to put it in water, right? So basically water can flow back into it and hydrate the electrolyte. So it's not typically a big deal if they're dry, especially if they're dry in a closed system. Okay, so closed system, it's the cap on the probe.
Yeah.
If that probe were just out in the world and not in a closed system, right, then that means that essentially that water that's inside the probe, right, can basically completely evaporate.
Mhm.
In that situation, that's a probe that's probably not going to last all that long.
So
So
basically, if the gel inside's all dried up, it's probably done. If it still looks jelly, then it could probably be rehydrated.
that is a very good way to think about it, Devin. So
Perfect. I'll take it.
um, basically, honestly, you can. What not to do with these probes, and people do this quite frequently, is they take their aquarium water, right, and then just put it like on a baggie on the end of the probe.
Yeah.
That's probably not. It's not the best way to do it. The best way to store a probe is basically if you can get just get some sort of cap over it, and that's
Hmm.
probably better than just letting it go like in tank water,
Good to
right?
know.
Because if it's in tank water, it just gets really gross. It just gets really funky. All you need really to store a probe is just pH 4 calibration solution.
Yeah.
That's going to keep the probe running for a really long period of time, even if you don't have the cap, and you can just put it in a bag of calibration 4 solution. You can leave it like that for just months and months and months, and it'll be just fine. You
Good to
know.
know. That's
So,
easy. All of us are overthinking it.
right,
Um,
right. Calibration. The problem is we don't typically have 7, and 7 would be better. The next better thing, or just take a little bit of acid with your 7 solution.
mhm.
Right. So take something acidic like vinegar. Don't put a lot of vinegar because vinegar is an organic acid.
Mhm.
Right. But if you can find an inorganic acid, like you have like some citric acid or something like that, just put that in there so it becomes a little bit more acidic
Mhm.
than 7. You're going to
Huh.
be in a much better situation too. So.
Good to know. That's a really easy way to do it. That's a good pro tip.
Great. Another thing people ask is, how do I clean them? You clean them the same way you clean your pumps.
Yep.
Yeah, just put them in some citric acid for a little
Huh.
bit. Toothbrush them,
Uh,
and then on an ORP probe, it's going to be completely worthless for the next 2 weeks. There's nothing you can do about that.
so,
It has to be completely broken in again, right?
so all you'd
Um,
be doing is cleaning off the sponges or any like muck or anything that's on top of it. Okay, so a little
exactly.
bit of citric acid, super duper easy.
Yeah, yeah. And then on a pH probe, you just calibrate after that.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's a nice easy one. That probably helps a lot of people. Dedicated reefer. I've been dreaming of getting an Apex. The time has finally come. I'm excited to enter the world of monitoring savage reefing. You've been warned that it's very addicting. There has been a small pile building up for months and months and months for a bunch of stuff that I'm going to automate on my water station very soon. So it's
And
addicting.
I'm looking
John,
forward to that.
thank you. Hi.
I'm looking forward to your automated water station. We shall critique it together if you shall have it.
Maybe I'll do it for next week's video, and you can critique me afterwards.
Yeah,
I'm stepping it up a bit. Stuff that's been on my mind for like a year or two now. I'm finally stocking up and adding some probes and more sensors and level sensors and all that fun stuff. I'm sure you'll be
awesome.
proud of me. Yeah.
I'm already proud. So,
John Reefer Vermont. Today's tuition fee. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Phil, good. I saved all my caps. Yeah, so Ziploc bag caps. I mean, it's good
it's
to know that you can clean in citric acid. I always questioned if that's too harsh or if it's fine. I've always just used a super soft toothbrush to clean off the little bits of any sponges or anything that may end up on the probes eventually. But
yeah. I'm always into self-deprecating humor, right? When the Trident launched, right? I made the video leaked ahead of time, right? I made a big deal about saving the caps,
yeah,
right? Like, save the caps, save the box, you know. And it was all for the Trident service plan, right? So if
yeah,
you had reagent that you were using, you could cap it again. And to this day, people will let me know that like I still have the original box with the caps in it, because they followed the instructions. Now, pH and ORP probes, the caps are way more difficult to save.
that's fair.
Every trade show, literally every trade show, I take the caps. All right, I'm putting them in this box,
Hmm.
right? So end of the show, I will be ready. I have
Gone.
my calibration 4 solution. We will be able to use these probes on the next show. Um,
Gone.
I think that successfully happened one time.
I
And
mean, one's better than none.
I've done a lot of shows, so it's
Uh,
very difficult to save the caps.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I've probably lost many of them. I randomly find them once in a while too, though. I should start like consolidating them for future use.
You can purchase replacement caps. It is possible to do this. They are
Yeah,
very inexpensive.
probably
So if
true.
you know that you have a tank move coming up and you don't know where your caps are, There's a great website that you might be familiar with, Bulk Reef Supply.
Heard of
Okay,
them.
you got Mr. Chili right there
Yeah.
on Devon. You can run over to there, or
And they sell the caps. Good to know.
and they sell, anyone sell. We
Hmm.
don't. Neptune Systems does not sell the caps, but there are definitely replacement pH caps that you can purchase.
Perfect. Quick shout out with the Mr. Chili shirt. If you guys haven't seen it, they're doing a collaboration with the Florida Aquarium, so all the proceeds from them are going to support the coral restoration, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yes,
Which is
it's
awesome. So
it's
I,
super exciting, man. It's probably my favorite Mr. Chili so far. I mean, there've been a
yeah.
lot. Like the Pirate Mr. Chili
Hmm.
really was good for me. But this Mr. Chili in particular, right? The Coral Restoration Mr. Chili, I really love.
Hmm.
Um, you
He's
know,
cool.
it's the big thing that drew me to Apex so many years ago, right? So
The
many
color
years.
orange.
No, I was pre-orange, man. I was
It's like,
pre-orange.
yeah,
So
I like
so
this old metal black ones. Okay, sorry.
yeah. So I actually did the AC Junior. I had that,
Yeah.
and then I had the Apex Classic, and it was a whole different experience back then. But it was this concept that it had these seasonal charts,
Yeah.
right? And we can go do a whole another episode about that. But that's something that's always been a lot of fun for me when working a lot of with all these coral spawning
Yep.
folks, right? Or ocean acidification experiments
Yep.
that they work on, and all these things. There's a lot of apexes in those worlds.
You know what
Um,
actually was interesting is because of those seasonal charts and be able to mimic nature. I mean, that's honestly been one of a huge driver towards them having success spawning corals and a lot of
mhm,
these things is being able
it
to
is.
mimic it so precisely, which is cool. And then
Mhm.
the other cool thing is, seeing all our hobby grade equipment, spawning corals and all these like hardcore scientific lab environments, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Craig's, really, in the UK over there, he kind of uh, really kind of made this sort of a form factor for people to follow. And
Hmm.
then all these great, like the Florida Aquarium, this specifically sponsors, everyone just keeps making it better, better and
Yeah.
better. And so it's just like we are becoming very successful in replicating nature to the point that something we thought probably 20 years ago we could never do, we now do
Hmm.
with pretty darn good success.
Which is pretty amazing. I love it. And yeah, I don't
But
know. I
let's not get sidetracked off of the
sidetracked.
medieval
I,
conversation.
I know. I had to give him a quick shout out because I appreciate when companies and businesses like give back to stuff for saving the reef and which ultimately saving our hobby. So it's good.
I would.
Uh,
I think we'd love to do a coral spawning special. I think that'd be fun to do
it's
one of
coming.
them.
It's coming. Side note: I'll save it for each year. But I actually went night diving when corals were spawning. Super cool experience. Um, Random T Rex just came in. Did you talk about how to raise orb? My nano tank is resting in the high 200s. So things that I have done to raise orb in the past, if you run UV, a UV sterilizer, that will help raise up your orb. The biggest thing that raises orb for me is ozone, but I also use this a very small amount, mainly for water clarity, but the higher ORP is kind of a byproduct to that. And I know some people can also dose hydrogen peroxide, which is, an oxidizer and will again aid to water clarity and, helps kill some algae and can also raise your RP. Those are a few things I've done. I'm sure there's more things, but those are the three that I've dabbled with over the years.
And the thing that I would caution Rex about is just make sure that if you observe your aquarium and you think that you're not happy with what's going on, like there's not enough growth, pH isn't high enough, these sorts of different things, and ORP has consistently stayed low. Go very slowly, okay?
Yeah.
Like if you go the hydrogen peroxide method, which you don't need a lot of fancy
Mm.
equipment to do, just add it very cautiously
Yeah.
to see kind of what it does, and then stop to observe.
Yeah.
Right? Watch how the aquarium responds to that. One thing is to become the mad scientist, right? And you're very focused on just the number of raising ORP. 200 may be very good for your aquarium.
Yeah.
200 may be maybe balanced for your aquarium. So you want to make sure you don't throw that balance out of whack.
Yep. 100%. First thing, how is your tank doing? Is everything happy? Is everything looking good? If it is, don't worry about it. You
Mhm.
know, if there is an issue and you want to bump it up a little bit, like, or there's tons of algae, then that's the kind of, then I would look at it. But if everything's happy, don't
That's
mess
what I
with
would
it.
say too. If you're seeing algae or corals are not coloring up, right?
Hmm.
Those sorts of things would indicate to me that maybe you want to tweak your ORP a little bit. If you don't do water changes, try some water changes, right?
Good old water changes.
I mean, I, I don't know, man. On those smaller aquariums, I just feel
It's
that if you're in a small tank like you said he was, it's the way you can do these big water changes, right, in those
easy,
aquariums easy. It's
easy.
not like, oh, you need this whole big vat or anything like that. And if you just start doing water changes every week or so, weekly water changes of 4 or 5 gallons,
Yep.
you basically are always keeping super fresh water in there.
Yep.
You're keeping in all the minerals. You don't have to dose anything, unless you have like SPS growing out of the water. You need
Yeah.
calcium and alkalinity in that time. But those small aquariums can be really easy in that respect.
My 20 gallon that I used to have, I literally did a 1 bucket water change every week or two. Easiest tank
Mhm.
ever, and it looked amazing. Like it's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
It's hard to beat that.
That on my Red Sea tank before I had the baby. That was that. Once the baby happened and the tank went downhill. As long as
Never.
I did, as long as I did that 10-gallon water change every week, that tank was just always screaming good. Didn't
Yep.
have to do much at all.
Hmm. Uh, so true. Okay, Port Wolf, wild chair thought. You said UV. How do halides affect it then? There probably is some. I don't have halides, so I cannot confirm nor deny. But I would imagine there's like a small effect on ORP from the UV in it. I wouldn't think it'd be massive, but there's probably like a minor effect from it.
I don't know. I mean, more of why the UV, right, is going to affect it, right, is because of what does UV do, right?
Yep.
UV kills algae and different things, right? Things that essentially would have to get broken down otherwise,
Yep.
right? Halides aren't necessarily going to break down. Maybe I'm wrong, but do
Hmm.
halides break down those sort of things? I wouldn't think so.
Yep.
You know?
It's true. Okay. So interesting comment. John Reef, Vermont. I dose H2O2 24/7. Biggest problem with hydrogen peroxide is it can react with other chemicals. The wrong combination can break down so fast, release too many radicals and kill a tank. So yeah, too much of
Mm,
anything, bad.
yeah.
In my personal experience, I see 1 mil per 10 gallons is kind of the safe range. I don't know
Mm.
how much you're dosing, but whenever I've used it for algae fighting purposes, I've spot treated. That's kind of the ratio I've always stuck with, and I've never had an issue. So your mileage may vary, but that's personal experience.
And again, it's I think John's tank is pretty big,
Yep.
right? So I mean, he is probably adding a lot more of this in there, but he's also dosing a lot of other chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so size of the tank it matters a whole lot in this circumstance,
No,
you know.
most definitely. So, from your experience, is there any other kind of big things with ORP that are indicators for you or reasons you would pay more attention to it? Like, you see a lot of apexes. Would you? Is there any other ORP related
So
observations?
the thing about ORP in general, right, is that um, at least now,
Yeah.
right, in terms of how we have improved the technology, and just in terms of our water filtration so much
Mm-hmm.
over the last couple of years. Our skimmers have never been better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have all these, we've got these roller
Filter
floss.
rollers. Yeah.
Prior to that, right, when you change out filter stocks manually, you can change out a filter stock and see a result in ORP within probably 12 hours or so of
Mm-hmm.
doing it, and so now we have sort of these things that are just sort of automating these, and because skimmers have gotten so much better, affecting ORP is so less common now, you
Yeah.
know. And so I try to take that with a grain of salt in terms of people doing crazy things with their apex,
That's fair.
to monitor ORP.
Yeah.
I will say that I have seen people control skimmers based on ORP, right?
Interesting. Hmm.
And one other very interesting part is, just it's because um, what happens when there are no nutrients in the aquarium, right? When there is nothing to consume in these ultra low nutrient systems,
Yeah.
right? And you can do these very, very effectively. But that's really why we start to run into things like, um, different dinoflagellates and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we've removed, everything from the aquarium, right, to consume. So the normal fauna that's there, right, that would normally consume these things, essentially there was not enough food for them to survive. Like we've kept the system too clean, and then dinos get in.
Yeah.
And once dinos get in, they take everything, right? In terms of any nutrient that they can, and that's why it's so hard to fight them off, right?
Yeah.
Because once they're consuming everything, how do you get them out? So the way that you get them out is you put other things in place that outcompete them, and that was Ryan's Dino series that he did last summer was super insightful in that respect, right? In terms of making sure that we have all of the fauna in the aquarium, and we then allow that fauna to prosper, right? And so basically, what I'm saying is that ORP can be really valuable in the sense of knowing when you're keeping too clean of a system and keeping too dirty of a system, right? If adding just a little food demonstratively changes ORP, right? That's not a system that is well balanced.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Now,
So,
random question: would you at what age of a tank is it more valuable for ORP? Like on a brand new tank is probably little value, right? 6 months, a year. Like at what point would you be like, okay, it's like there's value to pay attention to these trends?
Once I'm my methodology of keeping aquariums is slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
So for me, it's I get up a nice culture, of bacteria in the tank first, right, and then I start adding a couple of fish, and then I make sure I get my algae under control. So that's when I'm adding all of my snails, and any emerald crabs or anything like that. But it's as you start to develop your ecosystem, right? And just think of everything that you add, does something. So corals consume nutrients, right?
Yeah.
Fish expel nutrients, right?
Yeah.
So it's constantly making sure you're adding that balance in there and making sure that things don't get out of whack. But I say as soon as you start adding livestock, that's when it starts becoming very valuable. There are situations, absolutely, when you need to manipulate ORP, and those are tanks that are going to be heavily, heavily stocked, right? So if you are in a 220 and you want to have a school of 30 Amphios and you want to have 4 tangs and you want to do all these sorts of things, like there are tons of fish in there. That is a tank that probably needs control of our ORP. But if you appropriately stock the tank for the size that it is, it's more so something you just want to watch.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah. The other thing I just didn't mention is some foods can do really weird things to ORP, and don't be freaked out by it. Foods that typically have a lot of amino acids and sugars in them, right? Expect your ORP to always look wonky right when you feed that stuff. It should sort itself out in about 20 or 30 minutes, but you'll typically see a big dive when the sugar gets added, and then it should bounce back up after about 20 or 30 minutes. The thing that sucks about it is that it's really hard to understand. Then Apex Fusion will tell you your average. Right, and then we get these really weird things. Then it doesn't. You have to kind of throw those out and do a little bit of understanding.
Would you say it spikes or drops when feeding like high amino acid type foods?
It's been a while since I've fed foods like that. From what I can recall, it usually drops it.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
I'm going to pay attention to it because I'm curious. Because I feel
6 or
like
7, do it.
Yeah.
And again, if you have a lot of live rock in your system, a lot of places for bacteria, fauna to be, you're going to see the effect of this less, right? Compared to a system that there's very little fauna in, so it's why it's so important to make sure that if you go bare bottom, which if you're a person who wants to go bare bottom, that's fine. but make sure there's plenty of space for that bacteria fauna to grow. And
Yeah.
like just a block of uh, those medias probably isn't going to be enough,
Yeah.
right? Use a refugium, that sort of thing. Is my opinion. Or just make it look natural and have a sand in your aquarium or something.
Sounds the only way to go for me.
Biases coming through. Biases.
I can't not. It just looks natural. It looks good. Like
I
I
know.
tried bare bottom. Like no, sand had to go in. I couldn't do it. I'm sorry.
The calcium reactor method that I went on the ones on my Red Sea 170 really worked great because it was super porous,
Calcium
right?
reactor media is your sand bed. I
Yep.
thought about that. Or you're
Yeah.
happy? Work good.
It worked really well until I could no longer gravel siphon it,
Okay.
right? And so essentially, my corals grew out so much
Hmm.
that I could no longer get a siphon down in there, right? And what will happen is the same thing that happens in a bare bottom, right? Is that you get these, just clumps of detritus, that you have to essentially siphon out,
Yeah.
And so it worked really well up until, and then at the point that I couldn't gravel siphon anymore, that's when like the tank, stopped doing as well as it used to,
Huh,
right?
interesting.
Um,
Did you do reborn like bigger coral skeleton chunks, or did you use arm that's more rocky? Yeah.
Something more closer to reborn,
Okay.
right? Don't Yeah, closer to a reborn. The big thing that it was super porous and very chunky.
Yeah.
If I were to do it again, I would totally do that same thing because it added it added like I had copepods like crazy in that
Yeah.
tank, right? Like because they just had so much area that they could spawn and do all their
Hmm.
copepods wonderfulness in.
Yeah.
And never any algae issues in that tank when
Huh.
it was healthy. But if I were to do it again, I
Mm.
would do a refugium,
Yeah.
right? And in that refugium, I would basically have like a section that was basically for calcium reactor media,
Hmm.
very similar thing, and then I would have another section that is sand.
Okay.
And I would probably put a divider between the two of them
Yeah.
and do something like that, right, where I get the best of both worlds, and then put sand up in the tank too,
All right.
because I really missed a lot of my gobies.
I yeah. I have a very crazy idea that I'm dabbling with. I'll tell you later, but this
Okay.
may be inspiring it a little bit. Uh,
Okay.
so I think we did pretty good on the ORP kind of realm and why it's useful, what kind of value it adds to the trends of your tank. I mean, if you're doing something to elevate it, you should absolutely be monitoring it.
Hmm.
If you're not doing, hydrogen peroxide or ozone or something, you don't have to monitor it, but it's still useful to have. It's useful as an indicator, something died, something's out of whack in your tank. It's that kind of indicator to be like, hey, pay attention to your tank. Something's off, right? So that's kind of the thing. But if you're using something like ozone, something that's intentionally elevating it, absolutely you should be monitoring it to make sure, as a bit of a safety feature, to make sure you don't overdo it. Because
Yeah.
too much, oxidation turns into sterilization, which is bad. So kind of the considerations.
Yeah, yeah. And then the only and it's just do we want to do any how-tos of alarms real quick? Devin, do we want to spend a second on that, or is
If
that
you want to go for it, yeah.
Let's do your aquarium. You want to pull up your aquarium?
Yeah, give me a sec to log into Fusion and figure out what my password is.
Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
You never use your desktop version?
No, I do, but I use the tablets most of the time, which is always logged in. It's a different password and everything. I'm getting really good at doing different passwords for absolutely everything, so I have to double check it.
There are things called password managers.
Yeah, I know I have them,
I know
but
you
it's
do.
not like normal. Like I work in IT and security, and I realize like how bad most things are. So now they're all like just like random, extremely long, obscure things.
Yes.
I've learned never to use them again.
That's my favorite. That's everything has a unique password now for me too.
Exactly. I appreciate that.
Except the password manager, password, which is no one should ever have to enter that one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Pulling her up. So what are we looking at? Okay, this one's my water box. What are we checking out?
So what we're gonna do is here we're just gonna go to your ORP probe. Let's just take a look at your ORP graph for a second.
Okay.
All right, can you zoom out on
Yeah.
the thing?
Yeah. Let me just shrink it so it fits.
Oh, so this is great. This is great. So you can. So did you do anything? So tell me what happened over. It looks like probably the weekend.
Okay. So this is super tiny, but that's at 8 a.m. So what happens at 8 a.m.? Probably my lights came on. I don't know. Oh,
Just
ozone runs at nighttime.
was your behavior any different over the weekend compared to the rest of the week?
Not that I'm aware of. Oh,
Windows
yes,
weren't
there
open.
is. I cleaned my skimmer and turned it back on.
When
So,
did you do
so
that?
that would be a big thing. My skimmer was offline for like a week or two, and I finally cleaned it and then put it back on. So if I zoom into a day,
Okay.
okay,
Oh, that
sorry,
was the day. Okay, okay.
yeah, yeah. So that was like multiple days. So this is the past 24 hours or so. So
Mhm.
I do run ozone at night, and you can see there's this like table here. That's probably the apex turning it off because it hit 420.
That's exactly probably what happened there.
But let me go back a day. Okay, so there is. Let's do one day. Go back in time. Yeah, I
All
can
is good.
see it
All is
slowly
good.
raising from it, but
All is good. Let's go back to the all real quick.
to the all. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
probably more of a normal.
yeah, yeah. That was that's what it used to be back in time, and then you did the skimmer
Yep.
change. Did you do anything else when you did the skimmer change?
New carbon, new
Uh,
ROFOS, cleaned the
that's
skimmer. The tank finally got some overdue love.
okay, and then go back. Can you bring us back to current?
Oh, current? Okay. But yeah, my normal ebb and flow, you'll see it raise up at night with the ozone on. So
Mm-hmm.
here is one day. So this is the last 24 hours. So
Okay.
mine's relatively high just because of all the stuff I do in the tank. But
Again, the number doesn't matter. It's
yeah.
just what he kind of aims towards, and that's what
Hmm.
Devin knows. That's where my tank looks good. That's when coloration is good. Polyp extensions is good. I don't have to clean my glass as much. All of that
Water
stuff.
clarity is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can you go to all? Just give me the all look.
Yep.
Oops. Yeah, so I mean, you can definitely see you did something. What's interesting to me here is you
Hmm.
don't have a big like drop. So
Yep.
Friday was the 21st, and if you did it on Saturday, it just immediately responded. Right?
Hmm.
Kind of see that it went up and was very happy, and then essentially everything's gotten back into balance again.
Yeah, it's back to happy again.
So
But yeah,
basically,
that's definitely new skimmers, new
yeah,
carbon, new
bigger
ROFOS.
things, way more essentially ability to oxidize was there. Okay,
Hmm.
and then essentially the tank brought itself back into balance again
Yeah.
once you kind of added those
Hmm.
additions. So for alerts on this, oh, the other thing I want to show real quick, zoom out
Yep.
again.
Okay. Where do you want me to go?
Just zoom on, not on the graph, just on the screen.
Oh,
Oh, too much,
you want alerting? Where am I going?
Just do it yourself, Paul. Just do it yourself. No, I wanted to show people the average thing that the Apex offers.
Okay. Let me go back in ORP. Dun, dun, dun.
So just zoom out a little bit on this. There,
Yeah.
out, out, and we're good. Okay. Sorry, I'm being very directed today.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll
So
get there.
you get the average there,
Yep.
right? And then you get the minimum, and you get the maximum. Go to
Yep.
the eye view real quick, Devin. The eye, which is right there,
Yep.
and then just do alarm limits. So Devin does not have any alarms set up for ORP.
Nope.
So the way that he would do that is go to the probe itself.
Dun, dun, dun.
You would go the long way. You can just
Yeah.
go to the graph, and there's a little gear on the graph.
Oh, good to know.
So you can use the recommended values, which probably aren't going to be good for Devin here, but go to advanced, and you can just say advanced.
I'll turn it on. Okay. So let's just
Now,
say 350 to
no, no, no.
450.
It gets
Okay.
better.
Okay.
Now go to task.
Okay. This is the easy way.
Yeah, this is the easiest way. So how do you get to task? It's the clipboard next to the gear, which Devin never uses.
I use it when I change Trident reagent.
One more over. There you go. Oh, nope, nope.
There you go.
There it is. Okay,
Yeah.
now just hit the little caret, right button on the top, and just type in the word alarm. Okay, configure probe alarms. There we go. And select the ORP probe. Awesome. And basically, this is another way to do it if you don't know how to get there. So that's it.
Let's do 350 to 450. You've inspired me to enable my alarm. Thank you, Paul. Yeah,
I'm here
let's
for
do
them.
320. 320 to 450.
320 because you don't want to get false alarms. I hate false alarms.
Exactly. Boom. Done. Alarmed.
So that's the apex side of it. Thank you, Devin, for humoring me.
Thank you for making me enable more alarms, which I should probably have done.
Okay.
Yeah, so the average person, if you're not purposely elevating it, the trends is what you care about because it's an indicator of when, something died, there's something off in your tank. It should have attention. And then for me, at least, doing things that purposely elevate it, I care about it more because I need to make sure I'm not overdoing it because, again, that is bad for your tank. So it's just to kind of keep things, and being able to control something like ozone for me goes a long way. So that was my main original driver to start digging into ORP way many moons ago.
Yeah. So hopefully I was mostly accurate in the things that I said today.
Yep.
I always try to be in that way. If
Wonderful.
I was incorrect, you can always feel free to chime up and let us know. But that's
Perfect.
I'm speaking most from experience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Definitely appreciate it, Paul. I know you have your little one soon, so if you got to run, feel free.
Yeah, no, he's still sleeping.
Perfect.
Still going. I think we pretty much beat this or worse into the ground. So, any other questions anyone has?
We whacked him with that ORP probe. Yeah, if you guys got any specific ORP questions, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, a week or two ago in the Facebook group, hit 11,000 members, so decided to do a giveaway of an adaptive reef controller board. You can pick your color of the white or the black version, depending on your stand. So we're going to do a draw for that. Normally, I like to do the Wheel of Death, where we do elimination style, but because there's like ridiculous amounts of names, we'll be here all night. So I think I'm told to do a one long 30-second spin, and then we'll see who wins. And for extra fun, Reefing Concepts wanted to throw in a giveaway, so he makes NEM guards, which looks for the Ecotech power heads or the Reef Octopus one. So secondary prize for that one. So if you have one of those two power heads, hopefully if you win, but a pair of those as well. So this is just going to be a one spin it to win it for the adaptive reef controller board to clean up that rat's nest of wires and bring some order to that stand of yours.
They are quite awesome.
Oh, I have them on both my tanks. At the very least, you hide the rat's nest and it looks lovely when you look at it.
It makes things so much better, man. Until you have to find the cable that's going to something later.
Yep. Oh.
Is it gonna get him?
It is.
Dallas
Trippy. Congratulations. Hopefully you're on the stream. And if not, then I will message you in the Facebook group. So congratulations. Now we're going to do one more spin for the Reef Octopus and or Ecotech NEM guards from Reefing Concepts, by the way. Thank you for throwing that in last minute. Dun, 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 dun. Doesn't Adaptive Reef make remote alarms? They have light up and like audio alarms you can hook up to the Apex, which is actually pretty cool.
So they connect into the DC 24 volt output. And then essentially you can configure that like any other output. The other cool thing is the A3 has a built-in alarm, and it does
actually.
It's a little bit loud too. So.
Second, congratulations, Brent Bristow. Hopefully I said your name right. You have won yourself some NEM guards. So hopefully you have either Vortex or Reef Octopus pumps, because that's what he makes them for. But if you do, you're in luck. And if not, let me know and you can either pick yourself up some or we'll redo the giveaway, whatever. But hopefully, so congratulations, guys. Some extra fun, good stuff. Yes, Adaptive Reef makes a lot of cool stuff, actually.
Very cool stuff.
He does.
I really like. A gentleman by the name of Kyle. Very nice fellow.
Wonderful guy.
He makes the switch boxes and all of those things as well. I should probably do a giveaway next time I'm on, Devin. So,
I like how you think, Paul. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think I would like that. So if there's anything that people particularly want me to give away, don't just say an A3 Pro system, okay? Like, it's fine to want that. But what do you guys want? We can see what I can do to make sure we have some reason to be here.
All right.
Reason to season.
Okay, homework for replays in this video. Comment on what kind of awesome Neptune gear you'd love to win, and then we'll see if I can lure Paul into swinging it.
Yeah, well, I like it. I'm already committed, but now I just
Perfect.
no.
Extra committed. All right, Paul, I appreciate you joining me today. Hopefully you guys learned more about ORP and why you should actually care about it and kind of what it can do for your reef tank. John Reef Vermont, Casey, dedicated reefer, Shelly, thank you guys for the super chat. Definitely appreciate that. Congrats to Dallas and Brent. I will tag you guys in the ReefDudes Facebook group, and we'll figure out how to get you guys a prize.